And thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to be continuing our conversation from last week. If you weren't with us last week, we had a kickoff conversation regarding the home energy rebates as a whole. And today we're going to be talking a little bit more specifically about the home efficiency rebate, otherwise known as HOMES. And my name is Emily Salmeri. I am one of our federal grants officers here at the Oregon Department of Energy. In a little while, I'll be joined by a couple of my outstanding colleagues that will continue the conversation. Next slide, please. All right, and then here's a little look at our agenda for today. I will be going over an introduction to where the federal funding came from, a rough timeline, some related programs that we're working on here at the Oregon Department of Energy, as well as Justice 40, if you haven't already heard of that. Much of this we did go over last week in our kickoff conversation. So if you were there and you need to make a cup of coffee really quick, this would be a good opportunity. If you don't feel like sitting through listening to some of this, but if you are new to this conversation today, this will be a good background on some of the details of these programs for the home energy rebates. And then after I go through that high-level overview, I'm going to hand it over to our technical expert, Stephanie Cruz, who will begin a little bit of information specifically on the home efficiency rebate program and give you some opportunity to go through some of your questions and maybe some more technical or specific answers that you may need. And then after that, we're going to turn the tables around on you all and ask some of our guiding questions as we work to design these programs that will help us in specifying some of the details that we need to work through. Next slide, please. All right, so a little background before we jump in, an introduction to the Oregon Department of Energy, or ODO, as you might hear us referred to. On this slide, you'll see our vision, our mission, and what we do. Our mission is to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. Under what we do, you'll see the services that we provide and how we achieve our mission. And this funding opportunity that we're talking about today will help ODO support a resilient and affordable energy system, as well as a clean energy transition. Next slide, please. All right, and for those of you who are new to using WebEx, this is a quick guide on how to use some of the features. Attendees are off camera and muted, but our host will unmute you if we call on you to ask a question. And you can see the option to raise your hand on both the right-hand side of the screen if you're under the participants panel, if you click near your name. There's also going to be an option at the bottom of your screen where you can see a visual of a hand in the reactions bar. Feel free to use the chat function to ask questions or make comments. And please just remember to send to all panelists or everyone so that all of the ODO staff can see it and help to respond. And we'll try to get as many questions in the chat and through raised hands, but we may not have time for all of them today. And I noticed that some of you have called in on the phone. You can press *6 to raise your hand and *3 to unmute yourself when we call on you, and the host will unmute you from our end. And I just want to make sure everybody is aware that today's listening session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to our website in the next couple of days. Next slide, please. All right, and a little background here on the home energy rebates as a whole. So the home energy rebates are actually two separate but complementary grant programs that became available to Oregon from the U.S. Department of Energy. The U.S. Congress passed this large federal package, as many of you have heard of, called the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, and included a number of grants, tax incentives, and rebates to help consumers lower their energy usage and save on energy bills. So these home energy rebates are those programs that are available to us through the Inflation Reduction Act, in addition to many others, but today we'll be talking specifically about homes. And so the applications for both of these programs, HOMES and HERE, that you'll see listed on this screen right here, could not begin until the U.S. Department of Energy provided the requirements of the applications and guidance and clarification on any of the federal policies. So the initial guidance was released at the end of July, and many of the program's policies were laid out in that federal guidance, while many of them are left to the individual states to determine. Stephanie is going to give an overview of the HOMES program momentarily, and we'll ask some questions regarding areas where Odo has to design the policies for this program. Odo won't be able to have these funds for these programs until the grant applications have been accepted and an award has been negotiated. The deadline for applying for these funds is January 31st, 2025. And designing the programs is going to take some careful planning, but we understand that there's a lot of excitement and anticipation, and we're working hard to have an application submitted and therefore have rebates available much sooner. The goal for us is to have rebates available as early as mid-2024. Next slide, please. All right, another thing I just want to touch on kind of quickly here is that a common misconception is that the home energy rebates are not the same as the tax credits that are available through the Inflation Reduction Act. So the home energy rebates are going to be administered at the state level, whereas tax credits are administered by the IRS. And the rebates are a reimbursement or will provide a cost discount for eligible upgrades, whereas these tax credits are available as soon as you file your tax return this year. Another thing that I wanted to mention that might be of interest to some of you today is that recently on September 27th, the IRS issued some updated guidance relating to home builders and the tax credits. So the guidance that just recently came out extended and enhanced the energy efficient home credit and allows builders who construct, reconstruct, or rehabilitate energy efficient homes a tax credit of up to $5,000 per home. The value of the home builder's credit depends on the type of home and the home's energy efficiency. For example, multifamily dwelling units, contractors can receive the full $5,000 credit if construction workers are paid a prevailing wage. I will also just mention that we are not tax professionals at Odo, so please just make sure if you're interested in any of these, check out these websites that are listed here on the right-hand side of this screen, and speak with a licensed tax professional about this tax credit. Next slide, please. All right, and then this slide will be talking a little bit about some different programs that we're working on at Odo regarding home energy efficiency and upgrades. So the first one is obviously one of them we're talking about today, HOMES, and its complementary sister program here, which we'll talk about more tomorrow at the same time. And these two federal programs can help you upgrade your home and appliances with energy saving technologies. They're also supported by the TREC program, which you'll see on the top there, which is another federal grant program from the U.S. Department of Energy that is going to bring some funding to the state to support workforce development for the home energy rebate specifically, but as well as just energy efficiency workforce in general, kind of a sidecar, as we call it, to the Homes and Here program. And we're in the process of applying for that training for residential energy contractors grant. And we'll utilize the funding to provide sub-grants to existing programs in our state to educate and train new and existing workers, such as electricians and plumbers, to name a few, on these energy efficient technologies. And that program will help to ensure that Oregon is prepared with a qualified workforce to implement the upgrades and appliances in the rebate program. Another program that's going to be complementary to this is the one-stop shop, as we call it here. The one-stop shop was a bill that was passed this last session of the legislature here in Oregon. They recognized the need to streamline the approach to connect Oregonians with available funds for energy-related projects. That was passed with HB 3166, excuse me. And the bill will task Odo with creating a single resource that Oregonians can use to navigate the variety of incentives and rebates that are available to them. This one-stop shop is directed to provide information, technical assistance, and assistance in identifying contractors and financing options related to energy efficiency incentives and programs. Another thing that we've got going on is some of our state-funded programs, the heat pump programs. These are two state-funded programs, one for a community heat pump deployment program, which is going to be implemented by regional partners, and it's a $10 million program offering incentives to support heat pump installations for homeowners. And the second one is the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program, which is $15 million, and it's going to be implemented by us here at Odo, and it's supporting heat pump installations in rental homes. Next slide, please. All right, Justice 40. If you haven't heard about Justice 40 yet, it is a big component to a lot of the federal awards that we're working on right now. The background is on January 27th, 2021, President Biden signed Executive Order 14008, which set forth prioritizing actions to tackle the climate crisis. Included was the Justice 40 initiative, which directs that 40% of the benefits of certain federal investments flow to communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened. The home energy rebates are programs covered under the Justice 40 initiative, and it's Odo's intent to achieve those goals with these rebates in Oregon. The Council on Environmental Quality was tasked by the White House with defining disadvantaged communities. They used a number of data sets to show the communities that are most overburdened and underserved in the following categories: fossil dependence, energy burden, environmental and climate hazards, and socioeconomic vulnerabilities. Some examples of this data includes housing and energy costs, low income, lack of indoor plumbing, and wildfire risk, just to name a few. And these communities are determined at the census tract level, which are small units of geography. The boundaries for the statistical data is determined once every 10 years by the US Census Bureau. Additionally, lands within the boundaries of federally recognized tribes are also included. And you can, if you're interested in kind of checking out that tool, we call it CGEST, and that's linked here on the slide here where you can explore the map. All right, and we'll move to the next slide, and I'm going to introduce my colleague, Christy Split. Thank you so much.
Hey, Emily, thanks so much, and it's nice to see everyone here today. I'm a government relations coordinator at the Department of Energy, but also like to hang out and moderate webinars from time to time. And so my job today will be to help keep the conversation going. One thing that I want to share as we get started, this session is meant to be a public listening session and to really delve deeply into the technical aspects of this program. So we are going, like, for those of you who joined the call last week, we were asking to kind of not get into the weeds. This time we're saying, come on in, let's all get in the weeds together and have some fun. I also just want to share, if you're on the line because you're interested as a homeowner in a specific project for your house, and you might want to get into specific questions about your own project and whether or not it would qualify. Because our job today is to really be getting feedback on designing the program, we're asking you to email. In this case, Stephanie would be a great person to email on this slide, Stephanie Cruz at energy.oregon.gov, since she'll be our lead on the homes program, to email her with your specific questions that pertain to your specific project. And then finally, if you're interested in sort of the sister program that Emily mentioned, the HERE program, we are doing the same kind of deep dive conversation where we're going to get in the weeds and talk about the technical details. We're having this same time, same place. It's actually a different link, tomorrow, October 11th. So feel free to join us for that. And then a final comment. Many of you were likely with us last week when we had our kickoff, and we were getting a lot of chats. And just a few people chose to raise their hands and participate that way. I think it makes for a better conversation and maybe a little bit easier for me as the moderator if people raise their hands and we have a little bit more of a conversation, in addition to folks feel free to use the chat as well. But just know that it might be hard for us to get to every comment and every question in the chat, given that, once again, we have over 100 people on the line. So we'll be doing our very best, but just very clearly want to state, if you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand. And that actually is helpful to us to have kind of a mix of folks participating in both ways. So with all of that said, I think we're ready to turn it over and have Stephanie take over from here to talk in more detail about the homes program. One thing I'll just share that I kind of forgot to say, but I will share, is we'll go ahead and keep an eye on hands up and on questions in the chat pertaining to what's on the slide in front of us. And then we'll have a more general time we'll actually ask you a bunch of questions, and then at the end have kind of a more general time for conversation. So from now on, feel free to raise your hand, ask questions in the chat, and we'll kind of handle them as appropriate. Thanks for that. Thanks, Steph, for letting me say that last bit.
Of course. Thank you, Christy, for moderating for us today. My name is Stephanie Cruz, and I'm a facilities engineer with our energy efficiency and conservation section. And I will be kind of taking the lead on our agency's approach to the homes program and helping prepare the application until we get full-time staff hired specifically for these programs. So the home energy or home efficiency rebate program is a performance-based home energy program. And both individual households and multifamily housing buildings are going to be eligible for rebates through the program. But the difference here between this program and the HERE program is that this one has to demonstrate minimum energy savings in order to be eligible for the program. So using a measured approach to savings, the minimum would be 15% for a household. And using a modeled approach, the minimum is 20% for a household to be eligible for rebates. And we can talk a little bit more once we kind of dive into questions about how that would work. But for kind of setting the stage for our discussions, I wanted to highlight that so modeled energy efficiency savings would be typically require some sort of an assessment or an audit where a energy professional reviews the existing energy using appliances and equipment and then uses that information to estimate the cost and savings for potential energy efficiency projects for that household. And the key here is that the modeled energy efficiency savings for this program have to conform to the BPI 2400 standard. And that was set in federal law, so it's not negotiable as part of this program. And then measured energy savings would be verifying based on utility bill differences before and after the project is implemented. So typically that would require like a period of review after the project has been completed. Now there's room in US DOE guidelines for somebody to be like an aggregator, where they would kind of set up a group of houses, whether that's like a regional or smaller subset of housing that they're targeting doing projects in, and then achieving average of 15% savings across that group of housing that they've aggregated together could potentially be eligible if the state decides to go toward a measured approach or if we wind up doing some sort of hybrid. We have been leaning toward a modeled approach because we foresee that that would be the most straightforward way to get rebates out quickly and minimize the amount of time that somebody has is holding on to risk that the project might not be eligible. There are higher rebates available for households that save more energy. The minimum for that is 35% to be eligible for that higher rebate. And then we are also thinking about this concept of retroactivity. US Department of Energy is allowing retroactivity for the homes program only. And so for us, we're thinking about what limited retroactivity might look like. So either making certain efficiency upgrades eligible to receive a rebate or some version of that once we have enough details about the program figured out to provide guidance on how to determine whether or not your project is eligible. There are some concerns about how projects that are already complete can meet program requirements. In many states, and actually some of our stakeholders that we heard from last week have some reservations about logistics and challenges in meeting the program and also the equity requirements if we allow retroactivity. We have room for some discussion about that later as well. It sounds like somebody might be hearing an echo. Hopefully that's not something that's happening to everyone. Will, can you flip the slide, please? I'll try to continue here. Okay, great, thank you. So I wanted to just briefly highlight energy efficiency upgrades that would be eligible under the HOMES program. Unlike the HERE program, there's not a specified list of equipment or measures that would meet the requirements for the program. Instead, it's going to be based on the metric of whether or not it saves energy for the household. So it can be any combination of measures that achieves that minimum savings, including energy management systems like smart thermostats, more efficient heating or cooling equipment like heat pumps, high efficiency furnaces, on-demand water heaters, heat pump water heaters, other appliance upgrades, or weatherization measures like air sealing or insulation. So it's a pretty broad swath of projects that might be eligible. So I wanted to pause here for just a second to see if anyone had any specific, like, what is the program questions before we dive into the discussion.
Can you go back one, I think, Will? Thanks. Oh, maybe not.
All right. Well, hearing no specific questions about the homes program, let's hand it back over to Christy to kind of get us set up for our discussion.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So we did have a conversation in the chat. For those who missed it, someone asked if this would be recorded. I said yes, it would be, and then Emily was kind enough to share the link to it where it will be recorded. And Stacy is waiting to say that it will probably be posted tomorrow. So I think you have a complete answer there on that question. And then I'll be keeping an eye out for hands up or chats with feedback on the first question here. So we would like you to weigh in on the following questions to inform our design. We talked about raising your hands. For those on the phone, just a reminder that when you, oh gosh, I wrote down a note so I'd remember, but now I can't find it. *3 to raise your hand, I hope, and *6 to come off mute. Memory serves. Someone correct me if I'm wrong quick. But that's how you participate by phone, and that will always raise your hand and then unmute you. And then the first question we have is homes rebates will require demonstrated energy savings of a minimum of 15% of the household energy use for projects to be eligible. And this can be demonstrated using either a modeled approach or a measured approach. And then what considerations, feedback, or recommendations do you have on this requirement? And then Emily did correct me. It's *6 to raise your hand and *3 to unmute. And we do have a question that came in while people think about their answers or raise their hand to give feedback on modeled or measured or how that would work. The question is there an overarching plan to reach all Oregonians with information about this program? And I'll say that that's certainly a major issue for us. We do want to make sure that everybody knows about the program and that it reaches as many people as possible. So we're definitely working on that outreach strategy. And Steph, if you want to weigh in any further, you can feel free to mention one-stop shop, whatever works for you.
Yeah, I was going to pick up on one-stop shop. So we are working on developing a kind of unified resource to help direct people to the programs that they're eligible for and to help them access both these incoming federal programs as well as existing state programs. So that's kind of being developed alongside the development of these two programs. And then just a note that while this funding is substantial, there is not enough funding in the Homes in Here pots of money to provide a rebate for every Oregonian. So the reach of this program will be somewhat limited by that. So we're looking at identifying gaps and places where we can bolster existing programs to expand reach to include more people in improving energy efficiency of homes and helping Oregon make the clean energy transition. So we're trying to be strategic about where we focus our energies on these programs.
Yeah. We want to be really clear, like while we wish the money could even come close to reaching even half of Oregon households that need it, it'll be significantly lower how many households will be reached. So thanks for setting that expectation. I see your hand up, Doug. I'll get to you in 1 second. I did just want to say, Melanie brought up that measured seems like it could be risky. Like if you get the work done and then the measuring doesn't actually work out in the end, and so suddenly you don't qualify. So that was her comment. And then if Doug can be taken off mute, that'd be great. Doug, you're now off mute and you can share your thoughts.
Hello, I have three questions about modeling. Is the applicant required to pay for the modeling up front?
So the energy modeling aspect of the program can be covered as part of the administration of the program. So we don't have a complete answer on whether or not the participant would be required to provide some portion of that cost or whether we can cover all of it within the admin. We're still working on crunching the numbers and figuring out what is going to be required. But it is an eligible expense under the program's administration.
Okay, second question, are there software products that have been listed and approved for BPI 2400 modeling?
So there are a few like a few software products that are like certified meet BPI 2400 standards. However, from what I understand, they aren't necessarily in wide use.
Well, specifically, there's a product available in Oregon called Snug Pro. Is that?
I'm familiar with that one, and I believe it does meet the BPI standard.
Thank you. And the third question about BPI 2400, does it require a blower door test or is that optional?
Can you repeat that? I didn't quite hear.
To conform to BPI 2400, is a blower door test required or is that optional?
I do not believe that is required.
Great.
It needs to be specific to the house, but it does not require a blower door test.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thanks so much, Doug. Appreciate it. Meanwhile, in the chat, a few new comments. We do have a question about retroactivity. We're going to have a slide on retroactivity, right? Yeah. So
yeah, we did have a conversation about that.
Yeah,
that we
so
were planning.
I'll save that one for when we get to that topic. And then Jeremy Anderson flagged for us an existing program or a pilot program with Energy Trust that they had to abandon called Pay for Performance, where they found measuring energy use was very difficult. So thanks for looking back on that. Melanie had the concern about what if you get the work done and then the measuring doesn't match up. And Dirk shared that he talked to a company interested in contracting with us on the measured approach and that they would be responsible for that risk. And then we have some questions, and it's, let's see, certification or licenses required to conduct modeling, and how do organizations get certified, and is funding available to help with training?
So I would love to chime in just really quick on what we have available to support contractor training. And then I would also love to hear from David, who's got his hand up. He's a member of the BPI 2400 subject matter expert convened by BPI this year, which is fantastic. I would love to hear from you because I'm not an expert in BPI 2400 standards. So thank you for being here. We appreciate you. We do have a contractor training grant that we've been kind of talking about, like a sidecar to these programs that we are applying for from the U.S. Department of Energy. And there's also some state funds to assist in doing some workforce development to help prepare for these programs coming through. So one of the things that we're looking at is what is it going to take to get our existing residential energy professionals in the state of Oregon kind of ready to do BPI 2400 standard modeling. What support do they need to access training as needed to do that work, and figuring out how to kind of distribute resources to help support that development. So do you want to take David off mute and he can also chime in on some of this?
Thank you, Stephanie. This is David Heslem from Earth Advantage. And yeah, so there is some confusion about BPI 2400, I think, in general across the country. The law called out that the software had to be used that complied with BPI 2400. BPI 2400 is a standard of how you estimate savings for homes using utility bills to calibrate the model. But there has never been a certification process, and there still is no certification process by which a software is approved by BPI 2400. So what has been mentioned here is that DOE is actually going to be approving software. So that will actually be the process, is that you'll have to use DOE approved software. So it's assumed that DOE is going to use the BPI standard as the method that it certifies the software. And that currently there are software vendors out there who are claiming that their product is in compliance with BPI 2400. But at the moment, nobody can say that they have BPI 2400 certified software because there is no process to certify the software. That sounds like semantics probably to a lot of people, but it's just, that's the actual rule. So by the time DOE gets around to coming up with a list of approved software, there may be more software available, right, than the private companies that are out there talking about their software, which is all fine and dandy. It's just that's the way it's going to work. And then the other thing I would add is that the subject matter expert group I was on got convened by BPI this year because of the fact that some homes you don't have access to utility bills. So for not every single home will you be able to calibrate the model to a 12-month history of utility bills. So what was come up with was a separate pathway that'll be utilized when you don't have utility bills to calibrate the model. And so what that is referred to is it's just going to be based off the composition of the building, what the envelope is like, what the mechanicals are like. And no single tool was named, but it's pretty obvious when you actually get to see what this language is that it's the home energy score tool as a national standard way of conducting modeling if you don't have utility bills, because that tool was already calibrated to typical utility bills. And so that's what the subject matter expert group came up with. So anyway, just want people to understand that's where everything's at with BPI 2400. They're posting, I'll put it in the chat, but they actually have like a cheat sheet for state energy officials on BPI 2400 at their website, which explains things are still in process and they're going to be coming out with their new standard soon. So thanks for the chance to talk. I'll take my hand down.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it. We sure are getting in the weeds today. Love it.
Yes.
All right.
And
I
that's
did have a
exactly what we're here for.
question. I had a question come in that is not necessarily related to this particular slide, but we can maybe end there and then move on to the next slide. But this was about just, it was just a question about are high efficient condensing furnaces and on-demand water heaters, are those natural gas, are those powered with natural gas?
So that's a good question, and it kind of adds to the framework. So the HOMES program is not specifically an electrification program, while the HERE program is an electrification program. So energy saving measures for natural gas equipment would be eligible under this program. There's not a distinction made as long as we're meeting the minimum energy saving requirements. Those types of measures could be eligible under this program.
Great.
So I hope that helps give a frame of reference for people when we're thinking about this program and how to approach.
All right, we have a new hand up just before we were going to move to a new slide. Go ahead, Prerna, you're off mute and you're welcome to ask a question or make a comment.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Kristen?
please.
Okay, thank you. Hi, this is Prerna Tamar from Samsung. I wanted to jump in here on your question. And, one thing we've been thinking about is the importance of Energy Star and how it has over 90% brand awareness. And homes is very complex, as we all know. And, we saw in the DOE guidance that there's a requirement for Energy Star for heat pump HVAC for homes. And we think Energy Star, if applicable, could be a helpful way to really leverage and communicate around the opportunity in homes. So, where applicable, including for appliances such as refrigerators and washers, we think Energy Star, it would really make sense to make it a requirement. It would certainly help to advance the energy efficiency improvements. And so just wanted to jump in with that quick thought.
Thanks so much for sharing. We appreciate it. All right, so moving on to the question where we already have a couple folks in the queue on. US DOE gives states the ability to make this particular program, the HOMES program, retroactive. And most states have reservations about the technical logistics and challenges to meeting equity requirements if retroactivity is allowed. So what considerations should we take into account as we design this program for Oregon? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the chat or seeing your hands up, but as promised, I will get back to the two folks that asked about this before. One question, the first question we got on this was how far back would retroactivity go? And I'll let you go ahead and take these stuff. Very related is, would it include 2023 projects? And I will leave you with that.
Yeah, thanks, Christy. So the US DOE guidance will allow the homes program to be retroactive as far back as the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, where this funding was put into place. However, based on the logistical challenges and other concerns, I don't think that we're currently thinking about retroactivity going that far back. As I mentioned before, we're looking at wanting to be in a place where we have good guidance to give participants in the program so that they know what information they need to collect, they know how to structure their projects to make sure that they're going to be eligible, so that they're not counting on a rebate that they may or may not get because they don't have enough information to do their project and ensure that they'll get that rebate. So we're thinking it's going to be probably, if we do allow retroactivity, the timing for that might be closer to when we submit our application or when we're pretty far along on program design. And we are still in the early stages of developing the program and making sure that we have enough information about how to design it. And as I mentioned, there are both benefits and concerns to the question of retroactivity.
Right. As somebody wrote to say they were on the call last week and thought we said it's not retroactive. There's two programs, there's homes and there's HERE. The HERE program, the federal government very specifically said retroactivity will not be allowed. For homes, they said it could be allowed, but as Steph just laid out, there's some real issues with doing it retroactively. And so that is, that's what we're asking for, like what we should be thinking about as we make that decision. And if anybody has thoughts on what Stephanie had to say, that'd be helpful too. We have a long comment from Dave about modeling again. And David, we'll look at that comment, but I'm going to keep the conversation. Oh, wait, we got a question on the last slide again. So let's take, yeah, the next few are all on the last slide. So we'll just go back for a second, then we'll get to retroactivity in a minute. So David says that BPI 2400 subject matter experts thought 10 to 20% of homes in any locality might not have usable bills, and they need to use the home energy score tool. So that's something we will need to incorporate, that capacity for audits that use modeling from that tool. Arlene wondered, would a home without pre-existing gas service be eligible to install gas equipment and get the service installed on the program?
Installing new service is not typically a cost that's included in energy efficiency measures. I do not know for certain if the guidance would allow that under this program. I'd have to go double check. I can get back to you, Arlene, if you want to maybe ping me in an email, or if you wanted to provide contact information, we can get back to you on that.
And then we had another comment again on the last slide. The model route requiring a site-specific model to verify a minimum of 15% could work against the goal of equitable access. And he says, to the best he understands it, David can correct him, but that it's likely to reward larger square footage homes, and wonders, is there not room to propose an additional option to DOE that can model prescribed packages? Sorry, this is really complicated. Model prescribed packages for a package of homes more representative to specific climate, market, and build. Oh my gosh, it's still going. Is this too complicated to follow? Do you want to read it yourself? It's
I am reading along with you, and
yeah, and different. It's so basically figuring out different criteria so smaller square footage homes have a more level playing field. And now at the end of all that, no need to answer. Just wanted to throw the thought in. So okay. You don't have to answer.
I can comment on that a little bit. I think that the measured pathway with like an aggregator working on it is what the USDOE was envisioning would maybe cover instances like this where some homes can't meet the requirements, but other homes can. So you build like a portfolio of homes in order to, on average, meet the minimum energy efficiency requirements across that group. So that would be kind of more of a measured approach, is where something like that would be allowable under this program's guidelines. And the other thought here is that we have the opportunity to set aside funds specifically for different groups within the program. We have a minimum requirement for dollars going toward low-income households. And we have a Justice 40 requirement to meet, making sure that at least 40% of the benefits of the program are going to communities that are identified on that CJust mapping tool. So we do have some ability to prioritize funding to households that need it, and not necessarily have them be competing against like larger square foot households for the same dollars.
Great. Well, thanks for answering anyway. All right, now on to the slide we're on. I still don't see any hands up. We do have a couple of comments in here, including from my former next door neighbor and dear friend. So Jeremy just says, if the purpose is to encourage energy improvements that would not otherwise happen, doesn't seem much reason to spend money retroactively. The exception would be if there's a delay between publishing the admin rules and the actual program launch date. So I think for us, it's less publishing admin rules. It's more our application and what we put in there that we would, and then what we put in, we'd have to hear back from the feds that they say okay to before we would feel good about that being the criteria that we think will be for the program. So if we get the feedback from DOE that like, yes, your program's accepted as drafted, and then there's a big delay between that and the actual program launch date, aka us getting the money, that's I think what Jeremy's saying might be interesting to think about. And then Noelle wanted to share that retroactivity, she doesn't think retroactivity is appropriate for equity reasons, but if they were to do it, perhaps retroactive to January 1, 2024, just to help contractors ramp up gradually instead of starting when the rebates are released and there's kind of a rush on them. I don't see any other comments and I don't see any other hands, so I'm sure we'll get a couple of other comments on this slide later, but we can maybe go on and start thinking about the next topic at hand. So for this one, homes rebates will not cover 100% of project costs, and while stacking with other programs is possible, it's still likely that some of the project costs will need to be covered by the participants. Despite this, do you have recommendations and considerations for reaching Justice 40 and other disadvantaged communities with this program?
While you're thinking about it, one of the areas where we're seeing overlap between low income, Justice 40, or other disadvantaged communities and the homes program maybe lining up well would be in multifamily housing, which also kind of poses its own set of unique circumstances for trying to reach participants and get participation in the program. So just thinking about it, it could be framed specifically about kind of single family homes in general, or we could start talking in a little bit more about multifamily homes with this topic.
David has his hand up. I'll tell you when you're off mute, David. And I'm not sure if Stacy's here or Abby's here. I know we're switching our moderators during our host, but we agree now. Okay, great, thanks Abby or Stacy. David, you're good to go.
Yeah, thanks. So regarding specifically like how to reach Justice 40 and other disadvantaged communities, I would say, building into your delivery model, community-based organizations who are focused on delivering services to those communities. modeled around what's gone on in Portland with the Portland Clean Energy Fund efforts. We're starting to actually see a lot of success with that, where there are community-based organizations that were never involved previously with energy efficiency programming are now involved in helping get those services delivered to their community members who would otherwise not have been participants in these kind of programs in the past. Whether or not that means flexing some of the administrative dollars to go through those folks as official outreach or navigator positions or something else, but including them in the delivery model. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, David. We did get some feedback about concern about 100% incentives can lead to waste and fraud. Jay Ward, hey Jay, wonders if PSEF or the Climate Protection Program or some of the other federal funds money that's coming in be stacked to cover J40 customer obligations. The answer is probably yes on that. Steph, do you want to weigh in? But I think that's definitely looking at stacking.
Yeah, although there's some limitations on like which federal programs can and can't stack together. I know US DOE is trying to provide clearer guidance on how much of what federal funding sources can go toward any given project. And so there's still some ambiguity about what is and isn't eligible for stacking.
Great. But yeah, we'll definitely be looking at stacking overall as a way to get there. Thanks, Jay. And yeah, just what specific programs will be up for debates. Arlene wonders if the 80% AMI criteria, is that in effect here and covering 100% for those who qualify and 50% for higher incomes? Is that right?
So that criteria
Here.
the reason why we're asking about this is because we foresee it as challenging to meeting some of the Justice 40 requirements and targeting households that have limited resources and limited capital to support energy projects. So how do we navigate that space to try to reach, direct a minimum of 40% of the benefits of this program to those types of households?
Okay. Let's see. Another thought on providing clear paths for multifamily projects may be the efficient path toward meeting Justice 40. And then from Ashland likes to have good ideas generally. And it says they're interested in combining homes with on-bill financing for a Justice 40 track. And it'd be great if Odo could work with a CBO or the city to organize such a program. So thanks for that idea. Emily, our super smart federal grants officer, is weighing in to say stacking rebates with non-federal funds like utility programs is generally allowable and encouraged as long as the total rebated value does not exceed the total cost of the project. Good clarification there. And then we have a comment that an initial targeting analysis could drive the selection to identify DACs that will experience the best outcomes on their bills and provide system value relative to existing constraints, and that DAC communities are the most vulnerable to increased bill impacts that can be the result of electrification. So targeting connects the right customers to the right solutions, helping customers save on their bills while mitigating the increased energy burden from new technologies like home electrification, and should be considered as a best practice for implementing these programs in Oregon. So we'll make sure we look at that comment again later too. And Jeremy, again, just saying there's currently huge utility incentives on many projects and measures. I don't know that that's necessarily true for a lot of these, but will almost certainly not be hard to exceed 100%. I'm not sure. I think nearly all incentive programs prevent you from being able to take an incentive over 100% for what it's worth. And Dirk Larson thinks outreach to renters, both for the creation of the program and once programs are live, should be a priority. They may not be the decision makers, but it is them who's going to affect this the most. So maybe look into Build Shift effort in Portland. There's so much that is happening in the city of Portland that we're very actively tracking and looking into for inspiration. So thanks for that specific flag. I don't see any other hands up or any other comments right now, so we can go ahead and move to the next slide. And now a couple general questions. How can, we just kind of talked about this, but any other thoughts on how Odo can ensure rebates reach low income and disadvantaged communities, specifically that live in multifamily housing? So if you have any additional thoughts that specifically relate to multifamily, that'd be great. And then what considerations should be made to encourage landlords to allow for energy efficient upgrades that benefit their tenants? So kind of digging in a little bit more onto the multifamily and or rentals. Any thoughts on that? David has his hand up. David, go ahead.
Yeah, and thanks for recognizing me again. Sorry to take up too much time, but
No, I'm really glad you're raising your hand. It's so helpful to have some conversation and not just me talking in the chat. So thanks, David.
I won't make it an echo chamber. So I know some states have been considering just setting aside a certain amount of the HERE money for flowing through their, their state affordable housing finance office here. That would be Oregon Housing Community Services. They already have their ORMEP program, which is, energy efficiency money for multifamily programs. So just wondering if you might think about, pushing some of your money on here. If you want to hit multifamily, it could be aligned with that programming over there, since they already do a process for folks to apply and get identified, and it's all affordable. Some of it's new construction, some of it's retrofit, but the HERE money isn't limited to just existing. So it could fit nicely alongside that money if you wanted to guarantee that you were going to hit a certain percent of improving affordable multifamily housing. So
thanks for your thought, David.
Yeah, and I will just note that we've been talking with Housing and Community Services about their programs and how we can ensure that these are complementary to each other. So thank you for that additional flag on the specific program that they're working on.
Yeah, probably just good information too. And then we'll get to Jay. Thanks for raising your hand, Jay. We'll get you off mute in a sec. But what I wanted to just quickly add to that is we actually have legislation that directs us to establish these programs. And that legislation actually directs us to do it in coordination with OHCS. So definitely working closely with them. All right, Jay, I'll let you know when you're off mute. You are off mute.
I wanted to touch on Jeremy's comments earlier, and I certainly am not immersed in all of our offerings, but an Energy Trust operates and offers incentives for several of the investor-owned utilities in the state, and I can't think of any incentives that I would consider to be huge, with the possible exception of a heat pump pilot that we're running right now that is both limited in time and budget. The rest of the ones that we offer, at least in IOU territory, are basically cost effective and incremental. So I would hope they would be leveraged into this program, but I don't know that we're going to contribute much to the going over or exceeding 100% on the project cost. Thanks.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for confirming my thought too, Jay. We do have some new state heat pump programs that are just are pretty new. One of them is for rental homes, and then there's one that's being launched with regional administrators throughout the state. I think just one region is up and running. That's sort of the south central region of the state. And that particular program is for homeowners. And so these 2 new programs are up and running, and those programs can offer pretty sizable rebates toward heat pumps for what it's worth. But again, it's not allowed to go over 100% if you were to stack it with any other rebates. So, so moving on to one more thought here. This is Jeremy again. He says, landlords generally in parentheses prefer window replacement and AC heat pump installation, and that we should encourage bundling these with other measures like installation. And Jay totally agrees with that. And at this point, we don't have any other chats or any other hands. So we can just give a few seconds of awkward silence and move on to the next slide.
We've got one more person with their hand up.
Oh, that's new. Sorry, I just looked and I didn't see it. Jennifer Hillhart has her hand up. Go ahead. You're off mute. You're on
Totally
mute.
fine. I did it right at the end, so keep you on your toes. You know, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but regarding the last questions, is Odo going to be working with utilities at all in this outreach? Because the utilities do have low income bill discount programs, or at least the big IOUs. So they have at least access to that customer base. I mean, in general, but that specific narrow area.
Good thought, Jennifer. We are working very closely with utilities. Will you remind me that is that IOUs and COUs that new program?
Just IOUs.
That's what I thought. Okay. I just wanted to check. That was my memory as well. Okay. But yeah, we're working with both consumer and utilities, and lots of other folks that are kind of administering similar programs or working with the same folks on energy issues. So
Right. I figured, but
yeah, but great flag on that.
chiming in.
Yeah, rental assistance, or not rental assistance, the bill pay program, which is new, and people should look into it if you don't know about it. It's really interesting. Another person agreeing with Jeremy and Jay that incentivizing the things that aren't as flashy would make a big difference, like insulation. All right, so now I'm double checking again. I still don't see any hands up and I don't see any chat. So we can go to the next slide and I'll let you know if any hands come up again. So the U.S. Department of Energy requires the Oregon Department of Energy to submit a consumer protection plan as part of its application for the Homes and Here programs. This must include a system for collecting and responding to consumer feedback, resolution procedures, a data review process, an on-site inspection strategy, a qualified contractor list, and installation standards. Do you have any suggestions for the development of a strong consumer protection plan? Okay, I do see a hand up. I was looking at a comment that we have in here from the last conversation, just Jeremy pointing out some examples of where there's incentive programs, like I was saying, the renters program for us, which you could combine with if you're in a manufactured home where the program has a higher cap for ETO, you could be putting together sizable rebates. Jay, you can go ahead on this question on consumer protection, please.
Yeah, this may sound a little self-serving, but Energy Trust has a trade ally network that we leverage, and that might be a good place to start with qualified contractors. It's not comprehensive, and there are certainly people operating outside our service territories, but it could. We've been working with them over time, and if they're on our list, we generally consider them to be credible and qualified.
Jay, that's one of the things that we've been looking at is, can we leverage existing standards and efforts from our parallel programs in the state in order to kind of get a jump start on implementing this program for one, so that we don't have to wait to qualify contractors before people can start doing work, and other considerations like that. So we appreciate that comment. And I know that we've been doing some work with some of our partner programs, kind of looking at where the federal standards for qualified contractor lists differ from the current program standards, and what we can do to bridge the gaps to kind of get a good jump start on the list, and other similar aspects of the program.
All right. Jeremy suggests that we partner piggyback with existing programs that have standards already to keep things consistent. He didn't say that, but I assume that. And Arlene just shares contractors will be a big part of handling the rebate. Participants should be able to connect with contractors for the resolution of issues, is her thought. All right. Tim, hi, Tim Miller. Seems the total cost of projects should get some level of bench review or a percentage of projects, especially if there is any financing owed by consumers. And Jay, your hand's up. Is that a new hand or an old hand? Is it an, oh, you're off mute, so you get to answer verbally.
It's an old hand, and it's down now.
Thanks, Jay.
And then Lexi's saying it's her understanding, or their understanding, that the federal tax credits do not apply to owners of rental properties and can't be used for rental properties. And so there's a question there. I personally don't know the answer, and I don't know if you do stuff if the tax credits apply for rental properties.
I believe that they're only eligible for primary residence homes. So that's what I'm recalling from memory. I can double check.
You don't have to double check right now. We can have someone else do that. Or all right. Let's see. I don't see any hands up. Oh, well, we got another chat. Where do you imagine consumer protection program to be housed? Perhaps within the one-stop program or possible. I think it would be housed within the Homes in Here program versus the one-stop shop is meant to sort of be a tool to help people access information. So it could be a place people access information about the program, but I think it would be housed with the program itself. But Steph, if you have other thoughts.
I think USDOE just requires it to be to have a plan that we implement. So likely we'd want to use some of the administrative funds from the program to cover it. But it could be part of like a wider strategy that Odo has for doing consumer protection for our programs. So it may wind up being more aptly housed in kind of not specifically with the program staff for the Homes in Here program, but maybe some agency staffers that are doing this for multiple programs.
Great. Thanks for putting that in the chat, Steph. Looks like, yeah. Did you see David's comment too, Steph? It looks like multifamily rental could fall into commercial property. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, we're getting kind of conflicting pieces of information in the chat on the tax credit and who it applies to. But we have the IRS guidance.
There's multiple tax credit programs.
Right.
Yeah. So the IRS ultimately has the guidance on what is and isn't allowable, and they refer to the Energy Star website for like what equipment is eligible. So I would say definitely if you're wanting to figure out how those work, use those resources. As Emily mentioned earlier, this is not a program that we are implementing. We can just kind of point you to the right resources.
All right. So I think Emily put in another answer on the energy efficient home improvement credit. So look to the chat if you want more on that. We have a question, can a nonprofit landlord participate in homes, e.g. a university?
I don't have an answer off the top of my head. Emily, I know you've been diving into the ALRD details. You might have come across it or I have not.
So we'll, Doug, we see your question and we'll have your email from when you logged in so we can find that out and follow up with you. All right, so we appreciate the great question. We love finding questions we don't know the answer to because it gives us something new to learn. All right, I don't see any more chats and I don't see any hands up, so we can go to the next slide. So rebates will support the economy and jobs, such as contractors who will install energy upgrades. What support or resources do contractors, what support or resources do contractors, program implementers, and other energy efficiency workforce need to be ready to implement the homes program?
I dropped the U out of this one. Sorry, Christy. I set you up for failure there.
There we go. This was a new slide from our practice, so. And I know we've got lots of contractors on, so this is a great chance for you to tell us what you need because we're working on that sidecar grants application. Like right now, we'll be getting that one in before we get this much larger application in. So we need more workers with construction skills, not just supervisors, but people who are actually interested in installing. We also hear a modeling software that isn't so expensive so far. And then we need to know how efficient the equipment needs to be, like heat pumps. And then to have an up-to-date website or blog with current info. The heat pump rental program had a learning curve. It's still having a learning curve, it sounds like. We need clear guidelines for what information is required in order to submit a complete application. Not sure. Okay. Scholarships for EPI and associated training programs would be helpful if they are allowed, and they certainly are.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as we mentioned, there's separate funding specifically for contractor and workforce training and development, and then there's also some allowable funds within the program dollars itself for the administrative funds that could be channeled in that direction depending on what we identify as needs for the state. I don't know if we are going to be in the business of directly providing scholarships, but we're looking at kind of developing a grant program that could support that type of a scholarship fund if that's what we determine is the best course of use of those funds.
Well, the door is still open. Contractors, we'd love to hear from you about what you need. So if you have other thoughts, you'll see some contact information at the end of this. And so you're free to get in touch with us because we would really love to hear from any of you about what else would be helpful for you. And I don't see any other hands up or any more comments, but we'll, after this is over, just so you know, we will be going through, each comment and making sure we heard it loud and clear and that we're considering it in our program design work going forward. So with that said, I don't see any hands. I don't see any new comments. I don't know if we want to answer Doug's question or email him offline. I'll leave that up to you. And then we could flip to the next slide in the meantime.
Yeah, we can answer that one. So the guidance says that commercial uses that are not eligible include but are not limited to hotels and motels, dormitories, which is what like a university dorm would fall into, assisted living facilities that include hospital amenities, and correctional facilities. So unfortunately, university dormitories wouldn't be an eligible type of housing under the program.
All right, and Doug has his hand raised as a result. Go ahead, Doug. You're off mute.
The housing I was referring to was Southern Oregon University, which I'm told owns a lot of single residences occupied by graduate students, not dormitories.
Oh, interesting. So potentially that could be allowable because it doesn't fall into the dormitory category. So we'll have to explore that maybe a little further. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you for the answer.
All right, and we are on our wrap-up question. What else do you want to make sure we consider during the design of the homes program or the year program for that matter? And then we have a question from Rachel in the meantime, while we're thinking about that. Will associated costs triggered by energy improvements be eligible for coverage by the homes rebate, like structural upgrades, ADA upgrades, or other code requirements triggered by the energy improvement work?
Offhand, I don't have a clear answer on that one. I don't think so based on what I understand so far, but Emily or Will correct me if I'm wrong. I thought that the year program had maybe a little bit of a category that could be put towards something like this, but that the homes program did not.
Yeah, and hey, this is Will. I don't have a more specific answer as far as what's permissible in the federal guidelines. I know there's been some discussion around it, but I would say that there may be opportunity to think about other funding sources that could cover those types of repairs and replacements, and how we can integrate projects that pull from multiple sources to make sure that that work gets done before we install the efficiency upgrades.
Yeah, I have to say we've had a lot of conversations, just people reaching out to us, anticipating these programs coming up, or when we've been talking about other programs and this comes up. And it's like the issue, like, for example, people needing like new roofs before it makes sense to do, insulation, because if you put the insulation in under a leaky roof, that's not going to be good. And so it's definitely something we're aware of, that there's a need for funding streams that can help with overall home repair that might be necessary, just as an example. So Jeremy has a process question. He's flagging that we've put in significant work toward developing rules before getting very much outside input. And this has caused some aspects of the program to seem to be baked in before public comment, and then leading to significant program challenges later. Do we plan to solicit, allow early input in the program development process? And then after this webinar, but before we have solid draft language? Well, this is, I think, generally speaking, in my experience working here, we've sort of had conversations like this, drafted something up and then taken that out for feedback before we launch into the formal rulemaking process to sort of avoid that situation that you're talking about. So I don't know if that's from like the before times when I wasn't working here, or if the perception is when you see the draft language, it feels baked in. So I guess I would just like to say, if you see language from us, it's never baked in. We want your feedback, like guarantee we do. We just need to kind of put language together in order to get the feedback and figure out what we haven't thought of or what might not work out right. So I'll just say we're very committed to a robust and open and transparent public process. And if you want to meet one-on-one with us to talk through something before we put pen to paper, you're totally welcome to do that. But these listening sessions are kind of designed to be sort of how we're getting that feedback early. So, you know, just be in touch if you want to meet with us more specifically. And then, yeah, in my experience, we tend to kind of put out a draft before and do a webinar with that sort of draft information before we launch into the formal process. And then there's a form that Emily just put a link to that will be on our last page too. Has Odo considered adopting a measured modeled hybrid approach?
Yeah, absolutely. As we're thinking about how to approach this program, we're looking at whether it makes sense to allow both, to focus on just one mechanism. And part of that is the question to this group. Do you think, I'll turn it around on you, Kaylee, do you think that we should be looking at a hybrid approach? And if so, do you have like considerations or things you want us to be thinking about as we move in that direction and evaluate that option?
Yeah, I don't see if you want to put your hand up to respond to Steph's question, that'd be great. Or you're welcome to put something in the chat. That was to you, Kaylee. So if Kaylee's hand goes up, I'll let you know. Otherwise, maybe she'll add more to the chat. I see David's hand up, and then I'll get to the next comment in the chat. David, you're up.
Okay, well, if Kaylee, mine is a different topic. So if she comes
I think
back
that's okay. I don't see her hand coming up, and we'll just circle back if she comes into the chat.
Yeah, so my comment, okay, I'm really in the weeds again, but back on BPI 2400, you know, for houses that use 2 fuels or more, it's a little hard to understand, or you have to make some assumptions to say what's 15% savings or what's 20% savings if some of your savings is going to be electricity, for instance, and some is going to be oil, or some is going to be, you know, gas. So, you know, within the BPI 2400 methodology, you know, there's a proposed metric that converts, you know, energies into an equivalency. So, but what I wanted to say that I think Odo should consider is, you know, BPI doesn't consider the metric or the multiplier in the standard to be the thing to use. In fact, you know, they wrote a letter to Secretary Granholm at DOE to say, we think that number should be up to states to determine, because the makeup of power going into grids is different on a state by state basis, region by region basis. And so therefore the determination of what that equivalency multiplier should be something that states should have the freedom to consider as you all are putting your plan together. So just wanted to highlight that as another consideration, because it is, you know, we've been working on programs trying to put these 2 things into alignment, or multiple fuels into alignment when calculating savings for, you know, 15 plus years. And there's no right answer, but there's a program policy that gets determined. Thanks.
Appreciate the input, of course. I don't know if Stephanie has a response at all. Just go ahead.
Not at the moment. Thank you for giving us additional things to think about, and and consider as we dig into this program development.
So I had a question about, will there be operator training available for customers and ensuring that customers understand that appropriate heat pump settings and interactions with other appliances that would seem important to achieving savings. And I just want to share that actually we got directed by legislation separate from putting this bill together that has us do some of that work and prepare information, things like that to help with that. And it's definitely something we've been hearing about, talking to folks about both our training program and our kind of workforce training program and this. Steph, do you have anything to add or any other thoughts?
It can be part of consumer protection planning, including customer training for operation in the installation requirements for the contractors. And as Christy said, kind of supporting that with tools for both the contractors and for individuals to support them, learning about new technology that they might be wanting to have installed on their houses and be prepared for, something like a heat pump, which is a really different operation strategy than most households are used to if they're doing typical furnaces or other types of combustible fuels.
Great. And then moving on to our next, it's kind of a question and comment in one. This is from Larry at Three Rivers Heating and Air. And he's a contractor and he'd prefer to not handle customers' personal information to then see if they qualified. Does the one-stop shop take care of this? And the answer to that is the one-stop shop would not be. It would be more of a consumer tool to help them figure out what is available to them and perhaps help them take advantage of programs. But in this case, this program doesn't have income requirements. Is that right, Stephanie? We just have to know in order to help us figure out if we're meeting our Justice 40 goals. Right?
Yeah, so this one we're reporting to the federal guidelines on meeting a minimum for low income and a minimum for Justice 40 installations. So yeah, this is not an income qualified program necessarily, although we might collect some information that would help us determine that as part of the program. And then I'm going to maybe ask Larry, are you planning to attend the session tomorrow specifically on the HERE program? Because I think that there's going to be some discussion about income verification there and kind of digging into what the contractor and participant needs are to minimize barriers to participation in the program. So we might want to, we'll definitely record your comment here and make sure it gets to Will and the team that's working on that, which is most of us. But I think that there's going to be a lot of wider discussion tomorrow on that topic if you are wanting to participate.
It sounds like he's making a good joke and saying here, as in he'll be there, I think, if he's not in the field working. So that's great. And Larry, if you are in the field working and still want to talk to us about this, just there's a form you can fill out to provide information. You can also just reach out to us and we'd love to talk. So some people might have seen that Kaylee came back and said she's going to send us some thoughts on a hybrid approach. Rachel Moss is also saying that they support flexibility in the modeling approach as well. Affordable housing providers for multifamily properties often foot the utility bill for low-income renters, and they are often master metered properties. And these kinds of properties are difficult to calibrate in an energy model, as energy use behavior is highly variable and unpredictable, especially when residents don't pay their own bill. So thanks for the flag there. All right, Lexi has her hand up. You're off mute, Lexi. Oh, you're back on mute. Oops. Let's see if we can get you. You should be off mute now.
Okay, hi. I just had a quick comment because we are participating in the Oregon heat pump, the rental program right now. And I don't know how closely aligned this is all going to be, but I think one of the most challenging parts for us getting up and going in this program is the lack of specific detailed guidelines that were available when we were in the process of starting to get everything submitted. We'd submit it and then we'd get a return, this is what needs to be fixed, and then we'd send it again, and then we'd get another one. So instead of getting all of that information as to what needed to be amended in one email or one point of contact, we were getting multiple, which kind of delayed things. And if things will be more aligned or whether they won't be, if there was a more kind of cut and dry, more detailed resource available online for contractors to look at, I think that'd be very helpful. One thing, just maybe like a sample, like, invoice or something that would be more detailed than an example of what's being looked for, would just make things much, much easier. Just a side comment on that.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I'm sure you know that's a new program for us. So hearing feedback on how we can make that program better is great. And then we can also apply what we learned from that to this new program. Yeah, that did seem to echo what Mendy said to me too. Thanks for the flag. All right. So we are at a point where we have no new comments and we have nothing, no hands up. So we'll wait in awkward silence. I'm going to count to 20. See if anything changes before we go to the next slide. Or we can go to the next slide now. Either one's fine. It's the longest 20 seconds of my day. And with that, Steph, do you want to close us out?
Sure. Just want to note that this is preliminary, right? These are our first round of listening sessions where we try to keep everything very open-ended. As Christy mentioned earlier, we're going to continue having conversations with people who are implementing other similar energy efficiency programs across the state, work on figuring out the details of how this program can align with and be complementary to those other programs. We're going to be open to receiving feedback as we do that, and we will start kind of working through draft approach to this program and come back to the wider public group with an opportunity to provide comments, raise concerns, and otherwise continue to provide input on the development of these programs. Emily mentioned early on that our timeline for submitting the application is, trying to remember off the top of my head. Christy, help me out. Submitting the application sometime in early 2024 and hoping that we'll have rebates available through this program around mid 2024.
So we're doing everything we can to beat the federal guideline deadline by many, many months and get these programs up and running as quick as we can. But also while making sure we get meaningful public input. So I did get a question about the rental heat pump program, and I honestly don't know the answer. So Steve, we have your contact information from when you signed in. You're asking how long does it take for a contractor to get reimbursed? So I will take on following up with you. I'll find that out. I know generally we're able to cut checks pretty quickly, but I don't know if that's the case right now. I know that we have a lot of new programs up and running at once, and that sometimes can lead to us like slowing down as we change or, just adding that additional workload. So I will take on getting back to Steve. And then we also got a question from Tim. Any discussion about folks with medical equipment needs? Some system installs will require power to be off, and if there's a problem, could take longer than planned. Do these funding sources allow for short-term alternate housing? And I don't think that's envisioned in this program. But Steph, I don't know if you've seen anything to the contrary.
I haven't seen anything that specifically allows that type of an expense under the program.
Yeah. And then There is one more comment. Someone seems to think that we cut checks faster than the Energy Trust. I don't know. That's anecdotal, but I'll find out the actual answer from Steve or for Steve and get back to him offline since we don't have our heat pump team here. Well, actually, Steph and I worked a lot on heat pump, but we're not like in the weeds on the rental program right now. All right, so we usually kind of hang out for a few minutes, just if there's questions as people leave the virtual room. I put into the chat the information on the comment portal and Stephanie's address if you want to request a one-on-one meeting with the team, or if you have questions. But the portal is a great place to put comments because it helps us to kind of match what you're saying up with what questions we have. So with that said, folks can leave. If anybody wants to bring any other questions up, I will keep an eye out for hands up or for comments, and appreciate the kind words. And honestly, we're just so grateful that you all are making the time to be here. We really need to hear from you in order to figure out how to make this work best. So please keep coming, keep engaging and telling us what you think we need to do, because we won't know what you think we need to do unless you tell us. So keep it coming. Our doors perpetually open. Steve has a question if these programs are going to be the rental program where the contractor has to wait for the money to come back to them.
So I can answer kind of. So on the HERE program, which is the one that we're going to talk more detailed about tomorrow, that one is designed by USDOE to try to be an instant rebate to the consumer. So we're looking through like what the workflow will be like in order to try to deliver that as closely as possible. And that will be a situation where the income verification needs to happen before the purchase to allow for that to be as close to the point of purchase as possible, and minimize the burden on contractors or other distributors that are selling equipment or appliances to kind of wait for a rebate to be reimbursed. The homes program, as we noted, is very different, where we're looking at doing modeling in order to qualify for the project, and also potentially a measured approach. So depending on exactly how that gets implemented, we might have to adjust where and how the rebates get applied. So we're open to feedback on that. I understand that it's burdensome for many contractors to kind of hold a rebate amount or to front that money to the customer and then wait for a reimbursement. So we're looking at ways to avoid having the contractor be the person who's taking on that risk in that time period, or to minimize it if we wind up needing to do that as part of the program. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Steve. And we'll definitely be talking more as we develop more details on the programs about how to make it more accessible for small contractors to participate and how to minimize wait times for rebates to get issued.
Yeah, and I'll flag it's something we've been thinking about a lot, and we really want to make sure that we have adequate staff on board to make sure that we can get those checks out the door as quickly as possible. So that's another thing we're looking at, is how do we ensure that between either the federal funding coming in or sometimes even the state needing to kind of pitch in to help a little bit toward funding positions that can help us make sure that we're able to work really quickly. It's definitely a value of ours and a concern that we share. Right. don't see any hands up, and we do sit here for a few minutes and do questions will roll in. So we'll give it another 2 minutes of silence, and then if we don't have anybody else, we'll cut out.
Emily did chime in further on that point. The ALRD, which is the US DOE's guidance on the program on how it must be done, so kind of setting minimum standards, says that we would have to provide rebates to eligible recipients from measured program within 60 days of them submitting an invoice to the state, and to provide rebates to eligible recipients within 4 weeks of an eligible modeled rebate application. So that's the federal minimums in order to be compliant with the federal program. Like you mentioned earlier, we try very hard to beat kind of longer turnaround timelines like that, and minimize the wait time as much as possible. And like I said, we don't have full details on how this program is going to go. We're working on, how do we try to front load as much of the work to get projects approved, so that way once the money is actually spent, or the time and energy by the contractor is expended, then the rebates are coming as quickly after that as possible.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. Great, and with that, I don't see any other chats coming in, and I don't see any other hands up. So hopefully folks know how to keep in touch with us, and I think we can be done for the day and let everybody have an extra 22 minutes back off their calendars. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks for moderating, Christy. Thanks for being there, the rest of the team.